Did you know your Spellbinders Glimmer hot foil plates, or any hot foil plate for that matter, can do so much more than just foiling? In this video, you'll learn how to take one plate and use 4 completely different techniques to create 4 card designs. Hot foil plates are such a great investment because you can reuse them again and again, and they work with a variety of techniques from classic foiling to embossing, stamping, and more. So you get extra mileage from your supplies. We'll be creating beautiful fall and Thanksgiving cards using these tricks, so you'll never look at your hot foil plates the same way again. Stick around and let's dive right into these 4 creative ideas. I'm working with the Gilded Weave Glimmer hot foil plate, which is a part of the Spellbinders September Club kit. I'll be using the copper foil that comes with the kit. It's a gorgeous, warm metallic that works beautifully for fall, Thanksgiving, Halloween, and even all of your masculine projects. I'm starting with some Spellbinders cardstock, and this will be my primary color palette, but you'll see me add a couple more colors later on. Most of the colors I have here are from older collections, but don't worry, I'll list the new equivalents in the supply list so you can match them easily, or close to equivalents if I can call it that, because not all colors have been continued. Now, quick disclaimer. If you watched my recent BetterPress video, you know the heating platform of my Gemini foil press was completely warped and I wasn't getting even results. So I came up with a little workaround, and I really hope it works this time since it worked beautifully when I tested it out. And in case you've also faced something similar, I hope this works for you as well. Let's start with technique number 1, where I'll demonstrate the traditional use of a hot foil plate, which is of course hot foiling. For my background, I'll use this beautiful yellow panel in beeswax because I know the copper foil will create a beautiful contrast. I've got the machine heating up, and because this plate has a solid design, I'm setting it to level 2. And while that warms, I'll prep my foil. I'm using the Spellbinders cutting mat, which makes cutting foil really simple. It has grooves marked for cutting, plus 2 cutters, one for foil and one for paper. Since I'm working with an A2 panel, I line the plate up with one of the grooves at 5.5 inches. This way I can cut a piece that's exactly right for my cardstock. I'll also cut the extra bit off the other edge of the foil since I don't want that hanging over the card panel. I'll keep the narrow leftover strip for one of the narrow sentiments that come with this glimmer plate. Now, foil placement. I'll use the smooth side of the cardstock to foil since you actually get much better results on smooth paper. Now, the pretty shiny side of the foil goes against the pretty or design side of the plate. I just heard the beep in the background, so it's time to foil. I'll try to get the edges lined up really well, but if they don't, I can trim the card front down a little bit during card assembly. To keep things from slipping, I'll add a piece of painter's tape. So here's the problem, and I don't know if you can tell that the platform is curving upward. Because it is warped, I will use a finger protector to press the center down flat while also pushing the bottom edge against the surface as the timer counts down. It's not glamorous, but it really helps ensure even pressure. The only downside is I have to keep my hand here the whole time, but it's worth it for a good result. Once the timer is done, I'll add the shims. I'll pull out the platform from the machine and run it through my die cutting machine. And let's peel this back. Gorgeous. A clean, crisp, copper foiled background. So yes, the workaround worked. I'm not discarding the used foil since it can work to create another background. I can't demo it today since the workaround didn't quite yield good results with the solid plate that I'll need for this. I'll have to experiment more. Let me continue showing you all the techniques first and then get to the card assembly after, so please keep watching. For the second background, I'm using the same Glimmer plate with a piece of Neenah Solar Classic Crest cardstock cut to A2 size. This time I'm going for a letterpress. So I'll be working with scrapbook.com's rose gold pigment ink. It's a lovely metallic ink that leans towards a coppery color, so it's perfect for the season. To keep the card panel from shifting, I applied just a touch of temporary glue on the back. BetterPress plates are really similar to hot foil plates. So if you haven't watched my BetterPress video yet, I share various techniques for using BetterPress plates without a BetterPress system, and you can use those techniques for hot foil plates as well, and vice versa. I'll link to that video in the description below so you can watch it later. If you already have press plates and a BetterPress system, those ideas can still be helpful, so do check that video out afterwards. You see me inking up the hot foil plate directly with the pigment ink, making sure to get even coverage. Here's a little tip from Carissa Wiley. Tape down your magnetic plate or the chase so it doesn't shift and create ghosting if you need to run the sandwich through your machine multiple times. So the impression here is really light, and I think I'll need to re-ink the pad and try again. So I had to re-ink the pad and I'll run it through again. And since this is a soft sponge ink pad and not the firm felt ones, I have to be careful not to push down too hard and smoosh the ink into the grooves. Although it will probably not spread to the card panel, I don't want to risk it. Finally, there are some splotchy areas here, but I don't think those will be too visible once the card is completed. You can see how I just used a hot foil plate with the BetterPress system. While it's not recommended, I found that it doesn't seem to hurt the plate. I compared the thickness of the hot foil plate with the thickness of the BetterPress plate, and they appear to be very similar. That's why I decided to take a chance and try it out, and it worked perfectly. I'll save the background for later and use a glue eraser to remove the stickiness from the back. And it's so easy to clean up. Just a misting of water and use a strong magnet to lift the Glimmer plate off the platform, and it's a great way to avoid breaking your nails as well. If you'd like to see another look using the BetterPress system, keep watching. Now, for background number 3, I'm creating a letterpress look without using any ink. So essentially, it's a debossed look since I'll use the deboss side of the panel. When using this technique, it's better to choose a thicker cardstock. Watercolor paper works beautifully, but I'm currently using Neenah Solar Crest, which is very effective as well. I forgot a step, but I need to lightly mist my cardstock with a couple of spritzes of water, just as you would when you're using 3D embossing folders. Water softens the fibers and helps the plate press in more deeply for more definition. Now I'll run it through my die cutting machine again with the foiling plate, no foil or ink involved. By the way, you can do this without a BetterPress system by simply running it through your die cutting machine with an embossing mat. My BetterPress video demonstrates this technique, and you can simply swap out the press plate for your hot foil plate. The result is this really pretty debossed texture. The texture of the weave shows up stronger than the lines, which makes it look like a woven fabric pattern. It's a very different optical effect from the foiled or inked versions. However, I do see the edge hasn't embossed very well, so I'll add one more spritz of water and also add the F-shim that comes with the Platinum 6 machine. That's going to add even more definition to the debossed effect. Do you see how much more detailed this looks? The next and final technique is going to be so fun, and you'll see me accidentally create a bonus background. For the fourth and final background, I'm using the plate as a stamp. I'll ink it up with the raindrop ink from Salmon Says Stamp. It will create a bit of a distressed look since this isn't a photopolymer stamp, but it's going to be beautiful. I'm going to ink up the plate really well since I can't stamp it a second time. Actually, I just had an idea and I should try it out sometime, but I'm wondering if I can use the Misty for this. If I have any luck, I'll share that in another video, or if you've ever tried that, would you let me know in the comments? Now I'm going to use the scrap piece of cardstock that I found in my stash. Let's hope it works well. I'll use my pressure tool that I use with my Misty, and don't worry, it's just the hot foil plate moving and not the paper. We'll work with what we have. Oops, I think I just jinxed myself and moved the paper. Fingers crossed it's still fine. Look at that. I do see a couple of splotchy areas since I probably didn't apply sufficient or consistent pressure in those areas, but it adds to the beauty. I don't know if you can see it, but since it's a metal plate, it doesn't really hold the ink 100%, and the ink starts to pool a little bit on the surface, which makes it look like the lines are made up of tiny beads of ink. It creates this imperfect, textured background that's perfect for a more rustic or artsy card. I was going to clean up the hot foil plate with some water, but I just had another idea. Let's try using another piece of cardstock and see how that works. After all, why waste the ink, right? This will obviously create a completely different look, but wow, I didn't anticipate this outcome. It's fabulous and beautiful. And although this isn't really in fall colors, you can see the difference in the ink's intensity. One looks more blue while the other is a teal. I'm really pleased with this result. I'm going to set this aside for now. I wish I had used watercolor paper because the final product would have been even better since it's warping a bit and curling up. However, that's okay because I can place something heavy on it to help straighten it out or run it through my die cutting machine without a die after it's dry. Plus, I can always use foam strips behind the panel for additional support, which will help it flatten out as well. So lots of options. So from this one technique, I ended up with not just one, but two unique looks. To recap, here are the 5 different backgrounds I just created with one hot foil plate and 4 different techniques. I used the Gilded Weave Glimmer hot foil plate for these projects. The first background is made using the hot foil plate as intended. For the second background, I applied a letterpress effect, and while you can feel the indentation, I think a different ink might have improved the overall look. Nevertheless, it still has a nice sheen thanks to the metallic ink. The third background features a debossed effect created with the letterpress, but without any ink. This gives it a distinct debossed appearance. In the other backgrounds, like the letterpress and hot foil, you can see the lines of the weave clearly. However, in this case, you can see the little cubes instead of the lines. If you look closely, you'll notice the lines have been debossed, while the squares and rectangles are embossed. This creates a different optical experience from the other techniques. I also decided to use the hot foil plate as a stamp which produced beautiful results. And not wanting to waste the ink, I used another card panel as you saw, and I let the card panel sit for a few minutes under my cutting platforms to remove the warping and curling, and it's nearly straightened out. There are just a few small bumps where it's still damp. It was a last-minute idea, and since I'd already used too much water intending to clean the plate, the final print resulted in a less defined image. Also, the paper weight matters since there was so much moisture involved. If I'd been more sparing with the water, I would have achieved a much cleaner background, which would be wonderful because it definitely has potential for use on another card. I'll keep this panel and find some use for it, but I won't be making that card today, so consider it a bonus background if you try this technique. So now that we have 4 unique backgrounds from just this one hot foil plate, let me show you what I did with them. Let's start with the first card. I've kept all the pieces together in my Craft Stacks box, so all the elements for this card are right here. I'm working with a pre-made card base for convenience as I usually do. I've already done most of the die cutting off camera because I didn't want you to just sit and watch me run dies through the machine. To clean up the fibers left over from the die cuts, I'll use my fluffy makeup brush. I had quite a few fibers this time for some reason. Alright, here's what I've got. So this is the hot foil panel, and for contrast, I cut out another card panel. I use the Spellbinders pinking edge dies to cut the center out because I want to use this as a frame. I'll use the centerpiece on another card so nothing goes to waste. This will be an extremely simple card, but with lots of shine. The blue card panel I'm using is actually cardstock from the dollar store. One side of it has a nice linen texture, so I'm choosing that side. I'll center it on the base. It doesn't have to be perfect because the frame is going on top and will cover the edges. Next up is the sentiment. I cut out the word happy using the Acorn Acres die set, which also has some beautiful leaf dies that I'll be using soon. For dimension, I layered the sentiment with 2 extra layers of white cardstock underneath. I'll glue it right in the center of the card front. That's going to be the main focal point. A little glue oozed out around, but it'll dry clear. Still, I don't want that glossy shine showing through, so I'll just clean up the ooze before it sets. I'll apply glue sparingly behind the sentiment as it has a lot of cuts and I don't want the glue oozing out from them. I'll place a magnet over the sentiment to help it stay down and set. Now for the frame. I just realized I made a little mistake here. I should have placed the frame first and then aligned the sentiment in the center. That would have made everything perfectly balanced. But fortunately, the sentiment hasn't completely dried, so I can lift it off gently and center it with the frame down. Crisis averted. That was really lucky. Now everything is pressed into place and it's perfectly aligned. Now onto the leaves. I cut several from the Acorn Acre set in different colors. A couple of the leaves I'm going to adhere directly to the card panel while I'll place the rest on the frame. I'm keeping the tips free so they lift off the surface a bit, and that gives a nice touch of movement. To make sure the foam tape doesn't peek out from behind the frame, I'll use my nonstick paper to help cut some narrow strips. Now that the frame is down, I'll arrange the leaves so they look like they're falling. And we have card number 1 finished. I use copper mirror cardstock for the sentiment, tying it back to the copper foil background. By the way, you could add a bit of ink blending to the leaves if you like, but I decided to keep it really simple. And with all that foiling and mirror shine, it doesn't need any extra embellishments. Nice, shiny, and done. All right, let's bring in card number 2. And for this, I'll be using the Acorn Acres die set again. I've done all of the die cutting because there are too many different pieces in this set, and I didn't want to bore you with that since the focus of this video is the technique. I have a matting layer that I've cut out of some dollar store cardstock. I'm using one of my pre-made card bases again, the ones I usually buy off of Amazon. Then I have this matting layer here. I think I got the measurement a little bit off, but let's keep going for now. I kept about a 1/16 of an inch border around the letterpress panel that I created earlier with this scrapbook.com ink, and an 1/8 of an inch border around the red mat so a little white shows around the sides. Now let's start sticking things down. I'm using my tape runner because it'll be easier to reposition anything if I need to. I'll grab my glass mat and start building the card front. I'm going to keep the side of the top panel in the bottom corner because it turned out a bit splotchy, so placing it here will minimize its visibility. Next, I'll try out an arrangement for the florals and foliage and stick them down once I'm satisfied. Again, I'll give the elements a haircut to fit them in. I don't want to disturb the arrangement, so I'll just take my very sophisticated gluing tool, which is a scrap piece of cardstock, and slide the glue in under the die cuts. This is a genius hack from BB Cameron. If you haven't watched the video where I demo this hack along with 19 others, I'll drop that link in the description as well. Finally, the Happy Thanksgiving sentiment across the bottom. And that's it. Card number 3 is finished. I just love how it turned out, especially that adorable squirrel. I'm back with card number 3, and for this one, I'm using the debossed panel, and well, it did get a little bit warped because I had to spray the panel a second time to get some definition around the edges, and I think I'd sprayed a little bit too much water. Even though this is thick Neener Solar Crest, it still buckled a bit. But I can remedy that by securing the panel with glue directly onto the card base. That way it'll lie completely flat and I can pop the other elements up with foam tape instead. So let's do that first. I'm applying quite a bit of glue in the middle so it grabs onto the base really well. While I was removing the tape runner with my glue eraser, the cardstock ripped a little on the back, but thankfully it didn't affect the front of the card since it's a heavyweight cardstock. The nice thing about liquid glue is you have some wiggle room. You can slide the panel around until it's lined up properly. Once it's in place, I'll flip over my die catcher and put it on top. It's pretty heavy and works like a weight. Let me use some additional magnets to keep everything nice and flat while it dries. Now, let me show you the other pieces I have. Remember in card number 1, I cut out the center of the foil panel to make a frame? Well, here's the centerpiece and I'm going to use it for this card. I also cut out a little label using the second smallest die from the Spellbinders A2 matting dies. And for the sentiment, I've got the Happy cut out a mirror cardstock. I stacked it again with a couple of layers of white cardstock for dimension. The plan is to build a Happy Thanksgiving sentiment by combining the pieces with some leaves tucked in behind the yellow panel. I used a couple of pattern papers from the Spellbinders Kelly Bangs collection on a couple of the leaves. They're so pretty, and I thought this was a nice way to break things up with a bit of pattern. I didn't want to cut off the leaves from the pattern paper since it would be too busy. So I'm just using them as accents. But you could use fewer leaves all cut out of pattern paper to make it more balanced. The leaf shapes and sentiment both come from the Acorn die set, which is actually the large die of the month from the September Club kit, which you'll see me use again in the last card. So let's start assembling. I'm going to prop up the label with a little foam tape. I got glue all over the panel, but let's just clean that up and try again. The card panel looks nice and smooth, no signs of warping or buckling. I'll make this card horizontal and it works really well with the design. I'll add more foam tape on the back of the sentiment piece and just a touch of glue as well. The foam tape gives it lift, but the glue adds a second level of adhesion, especially since the surface is fairly textured. Honestly, if I left it just like this, it would be a simple but very striking card. But I do want to add some leaves for extra interest. I'll tuck the leaves in behind the sentiment. I'll need to trim off little bits here and there again so I can tuck them in. To finish everything off, I added a few gems from the Warm Tones Positively Dazzling Gems from Salmon Says Stamp. The colors are beautiful and bring just the right amount of sparkle to the card. And that's it. Card number 3 is done. It's got shine, sparkle, and just the right amount of dimension. So I've gone ahead and created the 4th card off camera. There was a lot of die cutting involved again, and the assembly is exactly like the last one. Here you can see I'm using the stamped background where I use the hot foil plate as a stamp. For this card, I pulled out the small die of the month for September called Autumn Magic. There were a lot of little pieces in this set too, but they're fairly easy to assemble. You do have the guide here on how to put all the pieces together, and that's really helpful. And here it is, this super cute cat sitting on a jack-o'-lantern with a pumpkin on its head. I used a different BetterPress plate called the Autumn Sentiments to create the sentiment for this card. I used the coordinating dies that came with the set and stacked up 2 additional layers for dimension and placed it on a vellum band. The purpose of the vellum is to soften the busy background just enough so the sentiment stands out. Without that vellum, it would have blended right into the pattern and gotten lost. Finally, I embellished it by adding 3 gems to the flower centers for a little sparkle. And I do want to mention that I used brushed black cardstock from Spellbinders on the cat, and for the ghost and skulls, I used white glitter paper. Other than the time it took for die cutting, this was actually a very simple card to put together. And yes, I used the same Warm Tones Positively Dazzling Gems from Salmon Says Stamp to finish everything off. So here they all are again. The first card was straight up hot foiling. The second card used debossing without any ink, almost like a dry letterpress look. The third card was letterpress with ink, the traditional way. And the 4th card used the plate as a stamp. And if you'd like to see how you can stretch your BetterPress plates further, like I mentioned in the video earlier on, even if you have no BetterPress system, then you should check out this video here.